Welcome to Boz To The Future, a podcast that I created so that we would have time to go much, much deeper on a small number of topics as opposed to kind of being surface deep across a larger number, as is so often the case in our industry and kind of in general. I'm thrilled to be joined here today with Francois, I'm going to just try it again, Francois Chardavoine, whose last name I struggle with as an Anglophile who doesn't speak French very well, but I apologize in advance if I've murdered that. More importantly than that, by terrible pronunciation, he's the CTO of Lucasfilm, Industrial Light and Magic, or ILM, and who has a 20-year history in immersive storytelling, and you are familiar with a great deal of his work, I assure you. I have a habit on my podcast. I don't like to introduce people, not just for the lack of me being able to memorize your prolific bio, but also because I think sometimes I miss the key piece. What do you think is the most important thing for the audience to know about you?
I think the most important is, even though I have a technology role, that's not what I got into the industry for. In many ways, technology was the back door. I always wanted to make film, tell stories. I wasn't a great artist, and technology was sort of that back door to get into it. Of like, okay, I can do that, and I can help, and I can participate in this process.
Yeah, I find this such a fascinating relationship between art and technology, and it's one that people don't often pay attention to, but it is a story goes back a long way. I remember a conversation in his book, Ed Catmull talks about, who's the founder of Pixar, talks about the reason he started doing the technology stuff is because he wanted to do animation, but he couldn't animate. And so he invents 3D graphics, invents the Z-index as a path. It's not an uncommon story for people to do that.
Not at all. And the history of film in many ways is a history of technology. Just the evolutions that little by little incrementally led to changing the way we tell stories based on technological evolution, and technological evolution reacting to how we wanted to push storytelling. We saw that in the 1900s, all the way back to Méliès doing visual effects, to what we're seeing now in terms of evolution.
Yeah, the early colorization of film was just like an absolute somebody going completely rogue, and the chemistry didn't support it yet, but they could draw it in, and that's how they could do it.
Yeah, and then moving to digital, every single step of the way.
It's funny, I think there's a degree to which storytelling is evergreen, and you go back to, Plato and the Republic, you go back to the
stories around the campfire
and the Okavango Delta, and there's this evergreen construct of storytelling, and there's these story arcs that seem like they show up at every era of human history. But we keep pushing the medium forward. We keep developing new and different ways of telling the story. And you've been at the forefront of that now for a long time. A lot of the ways in my lifetime that visual storytelling has gotten richer are the techniques that your company has developed. Talk to me about the past of storytelling and what that tells us about the future of storytelling.
Yeah, and storytelling is interesting in all the various mediums, whether it's film or interactive. There's a combination of art and entertainment, and that's true as well around the campfire. And the different ways in which you weave both together, I think, really create something that transcends beyond just the super practical, and it makes us feel a very particular way that you don't in other areas. And for me, there's been a little bit of an arc where I actually started in real-time interactive immersive, 3D cave setups with active stereo glasses, doing collaboration, but also doing it's like you're on a roller coaster.
Yeah. What year was this? Were you doing this stuff?
This was in late 90s, early 2000s.
Really pioneering at that point. Yeah, still.
Somewhat. It was also transitioned from SGI to commodity Linux, and that made it a lot more affordable to do some of these kinds of things. And then progressively moved into film, and then did more and more episodic. And at the time, film was kind of the bar versus TV. And you look at what you're doing on streaming and episodic and TV, and the quality of storytelling and the different kinds of stories you can tell, that evolution in visual effects becoming more affordable or being able to do more. The camera, the digital has allowed for indie productions that you couldn't before. And now we just have so much more high quality content. And then moving one step back to some of the things I was working on before, which is interactive, wearable devices, VR, things like that, where now you can weave a whole lot more that combination of entertainment and art with storytelling bringing you along when you're passionate about whether it's the Star Wars universe or something else. That ability to take people on a journey that's not just a linear journey is really, really interesting. And with the quality of headsets and other things progressing, I think there's a lot of potential there. A good example is the we collaborated on this, but Star Wars Beyond Victory.
Yeah.
It is a little bit of a culmination of everything that ILM X Lab, ILM Interactive, progressively just experimenting with different ways of storytelling based on input devices, the ways in which you can be immersed, and coming to a place where you're really weaving between storytelling and gameplay and exploration and creation.
Yeah.
And with AR in particular, even going back and forth between AR and VR and figuring those mechanics out from a design point of view, it just leads to a very different way of thinking about storytelling than the kind of traditional linear ways we were thinking of before.
Yeah, this is such an interesting part. So you have this like through line of storytelling, and I thought you said it well. Like the effect is a feeling, and there's art and there's entertainment, and they exist together. And that's like the effect that we're trying to create in the world for some person who's experiencing this media. But then you hit like 10 different fronts that like are all advancing, which is so cool. I mean, that's actually, let me start with this immersive one we just talked about. Yeah, because video games are a good example probably of a media that in my lifetime has just made tremendous progress and is still undervalued as an art form. Underappreciated as an art form
by certain groups.
Yeah, no,
they're not steeped in it. Yeah,
and longtime listeners of my podcast will know I hit on this all the time. This is the history of all art forms. It was the history. I'm an avid photography buff, and Ansel Adams, when he created the F-64 group, they were fighting for the legitimacy of the medium because all the painters were like, "This isn't legitimate."
Right.
And he had to say,
"You're not creating anything.
You didn't earn this knowledge. You didn't learn how to paint like Raphael, like I did. It didn't take you 40 years. Therefore, it's not legitimate." But it's like a different. It ultimately we come to see it as a different media. But that does have an impact on where painting goes. Like that does have an impact on the other media that live in the ecosystem together because they're competitive for time, attention, emotion, connection amongst the audience.
But on the painting side, now you value things that are a lot more creative rather than photoreal.
Yeah, it's a tremendous shift as a consequence. So these things all have a dynamic relation to one another. So I'm a huge believer in the idea of storytelling in video games having its deserving a little bit more credit for the art, not just the entertainment side of it. And yeah, this is a place where the interactive part of what it means to be at ILM Interactive really comes to the forefront. When you have a new canvas like that, that's different. So I mean, again, not to blend the pieces together, but in visual effects, okay, we know what a movie is. We can imagine this as a classical movie. We can imagine what it looks like with a practical effect. We can imagine what it looks like with a visual effect. But it kind of
fixed frame.
But it fits inside of a frame. How do you go about it when you don't have these constraints that are, inherited, but they give you some comfort, like you know what you're going against?
A lot of trial and error. Honestly, there are things that you think are going to work, you try them out and they don't. There are things that you just explore and you stumble upon some sort of mechanism or a concept or something that, oh, wait a minute, this is a way we can draw people in. And you still feel like you have agency in an interactive world, but you're still following a story along and you're able to get people to feel about the story in ways that are different than if they were just passively watching it. And we've experimented with this in a few different areas, including parallel complementary type stories where you might watch an episodic show, a Star Wars show, or anything else, and you have some other way of exploring that same universe and seeing like other storylines that happened at the same time on your own. Now, the real challenge is how do you make that as compelling in terms of composition and emotional beats, and what if something happens but you're looking over there, and what kind of subtle cues like audio to pull you back in. And so there's a lot of that that mostly comes from trying things out. And it's where it's really interesting when you have new devices or new technology, because it kind of shakes you up a little bit and be like, oh, wait, that doesn't work as well. What about this? Oh, we can use this new way.
Yeah.
That's also why it's really hard to do content that works well across different modes of interaction. Because in terms of experience design, for something to really work, like are you using gestures, are you using your controller, are you using something else? Those are very different experiences. But those...
Yeah, even if you can mechanically get them to work as well, the actual experience that you have in terms of how you engage you in the story is different.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you want it to be great. You want it to just be delightful.
Yeah.
And that's hard to do in a more generic way.
Yeah, this is such a thing that I think people miss so often when exploring in new media. The history of new media is people taking the old thing and porting it into the new thing. So the first movies were plays, and the first TV spots were shows that are just being filmed. And this expansive media that we have, you're laying on interaction and a high degree of dimensional freedom. And it's quite demanding. It's hard to even pull the previous thing over as it exists, previously.
And you're always tempted to latch onto that previous thing because, like you said, there's a sense of safety.
Totally.
We know that works. We're familiar with it. We have experience. And anything else, especially when you have the wild card of, a million people with different personalities who are going to try it, and you want all of them to be engaged in that way.
So one frontier then of storytelling is interactive. Another frontier is immersive, and of course you're working both those at the same time with immersive and interactive, and that's its own challenge. Those aren't the only frontiers of storytelling. I think we've seen the rise of short form storytelling, which is also as old as time. I suspect. I don't know this for sure. I just have a sneaking suspicion that cavemen did one-liners. I just feel like as soon as you could, we were dropping dad jokes on the people. I just feel like it's a deep part of.
I thought I had time to carve on the.
It's literally, it's like all those carvings on the wall are just actually dad jokes that we've lost.
It's a meme.
We've lost the punch. It's all mimetic. That's right. It's all memes. So there's all these other kind of forms of storytelling. And you said another thing that was so interesting. You talked about digital, and digital having been such an unlock for so many more people to participate. And that's another interesting angle here, where the future of storytelling is, okay, if immersive and interactive is expensive and hard and inaccessible, in many ways, the conventional storytelling has never been more accessible. And AI hasn't a promise to even potentially go even further, although there's some kind of risk there. How are you thinking about the direction that, film and television and episodic, how are those going to change in the next, 5 to 10 years?
I think they grow rather than change. I think we're still reading books. We're still there are forms of storytelling that work really well no matter what they are. And I think there's a lot of what is going to continue to be done. There's just going to be really good filmmaking, really good episodic, interactive. I think some of the unlocks, look at technology evolution, even my job in technology, spent 20, 25 years, on the one hand, pushing the frontier of what you can put on screen, what you can accomplish. You have to do a lot of R&D to actually be able to execute someone's vision
absolutely.
As accurately and faithfully as possible within the means of their budget, their time, et cetera, which means that you're constantly optimizing, streamlining, and you're making some things that were really hard 5 years ago. Well, now they're commoditized, and you're basically moving the goalpost of what it is that we have to tackle next. And so that cycle of pushing the frontier and then commoditization and then pushing some more, and then little by little, more and more people are able to do more. I see that trend generally continuing. And to some extent, AI fits into that in the sense that there are some areas where you're going to be able to do things you're never able to do. Certainly not with the constraints you have. There are other areas where you're just helping. You're optimizing. You're taking some of the drudgery out so that people can focus on the creative aspects that matter. And generally speaking, the more accessible you make things, the more things get created. Yeah. And that's opportunity for, I think, a lot more stories to be told that wouldn't have been told before. Yeah. Which is one of the things I'm most excited about. Yeah, and this is such a smart point. The history of technology, of course, it's disruptive, and we recognize that. And there's a bunch of jobs that used to exist that don't exist today. But we've never turned that into nothing. We've always turned it into more. We've always done it. As the entire history of our species, we've always turned it into more. It's funny, Jim Cameron said something very similar, which is I don't want to make my movie for half as much money. I want to make 2 movies. That's the real goal is to make double the output. Then you have a much more competitive marketplace and more stories being told. That means you as the consumer of a story have more to choose from. And it's more likely that there's going to be some resonant piece of art and media out there. And certainly, the history, at least look at the history of visual effects. Through constant evolution of the technology, we're doing a lot more and not less. Yeah. And to be honest, even movies are not necessarily the choices haven't been made to make movies cheaper, at least not systematically. The choices have been made to make movies bigger, better,
that's right,
more impressive, really leaning into the spectacle. And so what it gives you is the choice to do all of it. And that, I mean, a perfect example that we talk about internally quite a bit is we've been through transitions from a technology point of view, from everything being practical, models, miniatures, to more and more progressively being digital, most things being digital, but not everything. We still do stop motion. We still do miniatures with motion control. One, it's fun, but two, it helps ground things in a certain way. And in some cases, it is the most efficient choice. What you have is now an even bigger toolbox to solve the problem. And despite all that, we have more artists today at Industrial Light and Magic than we ever had in ILM's history, and not less.
Yeah, totally.
I'm optimistic about the future, continuing that trend.
It is such an unusual time. And I think some of this is to your point about, hey, listen, we still read books. We're still doing every form of media we've ever created, basically. We're still doing, hey, I've still been to look at cave paintings. So I'm still looking at those, dad jokes I don't understand. So like every media we've ever created is still a part of a larger ecosystem of consumption that people do. So many people are pessimistic about the future of cinema, the future of movies. You see it right all the time, and people really criticizing the box office receipts of this or that, or the profitability of this or that. And at the same time, as a consumer, as someone who loves film, I feel like I've never had more great things to watch and more interesting and unusual things to watch. How do you see that? I mean, you must be, like you said, you got into this for the art of it, for the goal of telling these stories. Do you find that as somebody who's on the inside of the industry, you share an optimism about the industry and the optimism you have for the technology and the stories that can tell? I get that's also what you do professionally, so I would hope you feel optimistic about that. But what about the broader economics, the broader industry itself?
Yeah, I will say there's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah.
Visual effects and filmmaking, regardless of technology, has had plenty of ebbs and flows, like really good years, really, really bad years. It's a competitive business. It's a low margin business, depending what role you play.
Yeah.
So that uncertainty around the future and a concern especially from a job safety, I think that's always been there. I think where going forward, especially people in a leadership position and how you're setting company culture, you have a responsibility to take that into account and make the best possible outcomes happen. You have to think about where can technology really help, and are we actually going in that direction or in a different direction? If not, what are the incentives that would help us go in a more constructive and positive direction? There's legitimate reason to be concerned, especially with less people going to the theater.
Yeah.
On the other side, there's opportunity for creating new and different kinds of content as well. And then where do you lean into that to really maximize both the art of it, the stories that you want to tell, but also as a business, sustaining yourself.
No, you make a good point, and I think it's so funny. People would accuse us of this, I suspect, but it's so important how you started talking about why you got into this. I do think sometimes you see a project that's made where it feels like the technology was used for technology's sake, as opposed to like for the sake of what the story needed, like what was required to tell that story in that way. And you and I have both had this experience, I'm sure, of like, I've seen incredible films with tiny budgets and, very limited or no, major effects budget. And it's a story that's a great story that's worth telling. But there is a smaller number of those stories by definition. If you're doing a science fiction epic, that's just it's really tough to play it, completely earthbound with conventionally available things. And so the number and type of stories you can tell becomes more expansive. I've gotten a little bit farther afield. Forgive me. I just find this such a fascinating topic. Let's get back to this technology question. Let's go deep on some of these pieces. Okay, do you guys start with a story idea? Is that how it starts? Do you start with say, hey, here's a universe that if we play in this space of the universe, or here's a character, where does it start for you guys in the inside of the industry? Before you layer in all the technology, before you layer in all the effects, like what's the kernel of it?
Honestly, it really depends. And this is a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but sometimes it starts with just ideas around a moment or a character. Sometimes it starts with, like, you think of Rogue One. It started with 2 lines in the opening crawl.
Totally. Yeah. Got to fix one of the all-time great
Yeah.
open questions. Yeah, yeah.
And you're like, where does that take you? Sometimes it's more around, like, what are the kinds of stories we haven't told before that we would like to? I know certainly for Lucasfilm, a lot of how when we work with filmmakers, we don't bring them in telling them, make a Star Wars movie.
Yeah.
We bring them in and ask, what's a really great story you want to tell? And then you generally figure out, like, what makes sense in a particular universe. But that's not the starting point.
Yeah.
You're not just like, all right, here are the 5 building blocks that we'll let you assemble with. I think you really want something unique, exceptional, engaging. And then the franchise of it all, in some ways, is a little bit secondary.
Right.
Because you really just want something great.
Yeah, totally. And there must be a dialogue between the filmmaker, the director, and the vision they have, and what is possible. So sometimes you're having to say, no, I'm sorry, we just can't.
I wish that happened more often.
Is that right?
Go on.
No. And then sometimes you must also tell them, hey, did you know this thing is now possible? Like,
right.
There must be some back and forth that has to be a negotiation here.
Absolutely.
And,
yeah.
Has a real impact on what story is told.
Yeah, because on the one hand, so Vicky Dobbs-Beck, who ran XLab and our immersive business, has a great quote, which is that creativity leads and technology enables, but sometimes technology can inspire as well. And so you have that reinforcement mechanism of, I had this idea, partially biased because you didn't think something else was possible. Sure. And then you realize, wait a minute, I could do that. And that leads your creative in a different way. So honestly, the way we start is typically unbounded in the sense of, like, what's the story you want to tell?
Right.
And then there's the realities of, like, yes, but it's coming out next summer and here's the budget you have.
Right.
And that's where you talk about options of, like, well, what if you did it this way? Oh, if we just change this thing, then we can actually accomplish this. Or maybe we can develop some R&D that'll work in that way. And so that led to, for instance, our stagecraft technology, which is circling a set with an LED volume with real-time rendering that adjusts to the parallax of the camera. And so you have the combination of just being much more accurate lighting, which on a show like Mandalorian, if you have a walking chrome ball as your main character...
Yeah,
you're not going to want to fix every shot in post.
Absolutely.
But then you also have some ability to actually find your shot in a way where you may not be able to do that in a sea of green screens.
Yeah.
And so that led to, like, oh, wait a minute, if we're doing it this way, here's some more that we could do on a show or different kinds of shows this way. And so you have one pushing the other. Yeah, which is the most interesting bit to me.
Mandalorian really brought it all together with that technology. But Jon Favreau, even when he was on Lion King, was early adopting using VR headsets to scope out and make sure that what he was going to get in the eventual render was right. So you're minimizing. So all the technology being applied to tell these stories isn't even necessarily in the print. Mm-hmm. It's some of it is even upstream in the process, which I think is interesting.
And I think that's where there's a lot of opportunity to improve things as well. Today, we rely on a pretty slow process for, as you're building a story, as you're going through cuts, you're trying to figure out if it works, you're going to do storyboards, you're going to work through previs, you're going to try it out, you're going to realize, ooh, those beats don't really work. Then you're back to the drawing board. That cycle of iteration can sometimes lead to just not being able to tell a story because you missed your window. Your director's not available. Your release date's not available. That ability to answer some of those early creative questions much more quickly, rather than waiting until you've gone way into visual effects, which is a really expensive time to make changes, means that you have a higher likelihood to make the movie. Yeah. You have a higher likelihood for that movie to be great. Yeah. And you're really going to be efficient in your post-production because you know exactly what you want. Yeah. And then now the key is accomplishing it to, like, the highest quality possible. So that's not really talked about as much, but I think there's a lot of opportunity there.
Yeah, no, tremendous. It's kind of interesting to me. So much of the work of the film is cheap up front and expensive on the back. Right. It's like, and so if you get it right, up front, like,
but it's also like the butterfly effect. Like your cheap changes, if you make the wrong ones, then it's going to be really expensive.
Branches out indefinitely. Yeah, no, incredible. You talked about the R&D. What I'm kind of curious about for you guys is, like, so you have the projects. Those projects are inspiring capabilities that if you had those capabilities would make things easier. And sometimes you have these real breakthroughs. And again, without giving up anything specific, obviously, what are the areas of R&D that you think are the most interesting for visual storytelling?
There's a couple areas. I think one, there's still a frontier with just digital humans and digital characters to a level where you're completely immersed and never question it.
Yeah. It's amazing how hard that problem is to get that last mile. Like uncanny valley is
and the lizard brain, we're so programmed to all the little specificities of the human twitches in the face and things like that. Tremendous progress has been made, but that's still an area where it's very easy to get it wrong.
Yeah.
And pushing that along. The other area for me is moving into more and more interactive workflows.
Mm-hmm.
The more you can work in real time, the closer you get to, indie filmmaking on set, where you can make those decisions, right away whether you got it or not, whether it's good or not. You can tell that if I move in that direction, it's more this way, that direction, it's more this. And the more you can work in an interactive fashion, the better your outcome.
Yeah.
You're not hitting a button, then waiting, then hitting, then waiting, and you're not quite sure what the button does because you haven't hit it enough times.
Right.
And, that's where artists are I'm always in awe of their ability to lean into the technology as it is today with all its warts and flaws and still come out with something amazing. Because they not only have the creative eye and intent for like what is good and where they want to get to, but really understanding how to like kit bash. I have this solution, I'm going to combine it in this way. I'm going to hit this. I know it's going to take 2 days to simulate, but I've done these things. All of that is... I think is the key to everything. And a lot of times when people talk about technology, they leave out the fact that, sure, it enables things that weren't possible before, but it enables nothing if you don't have the people and the artists who are there leveraging it to its fullest extent. And what's really, this is the history of visual effects, but I'd say at ILM in particular, there's an ability to just kit bash and orchestrate all of the solutions that you have available in a collaborative way, people working together to say, okay, for this shot, here's what will really work. For this shot, here's what will work. And it's not just one thing. Nobody's hitting a button. They're figuring out the best choice as they go along. And all of the technologies, whether it's traditional all the way to like generative AI, as we're looking into these things, these are all going to be tools in an artist's arsenal to lead to the best possible outcome. It's never going to be just one. And I think really the strength is leaning into hybrid workflows. Those like you're going from real time to 3D to something maybe generative that helps you here, bouncing back into a 3D portion, like all of these things, that's going to be the superpower.
This is such a fascinating angle. So, for those of us who are watching films, it looks effortless, right? The beauty, it's like you see this exquisite product. One of my favorite Instagram accounts is called Shitty Rigs. And I'm a photographer, so it's for cinematographers. And it's all the hilarious ways that they've like rigged up their cameras and lighting because they didn't have the right, crane, they didn't have the right thing and what to do. And there's a software version of that too, where it's like, the output looks great, but you have no idea like the hilarious sequence of like intermediate steps that we had to take to get to that output. And you don't care, and you shouldn't care because it's a production. It's funny. This will be a good transition actually, because obviously we got to talk about generative AI. It's a hugely important adjacent piece that's going to affect visual effects. It's going to affect storytelling. And it's funny. Some of the effects might actually not even be. There's so much energy going towards the artistic questions about it, which are fair and valid questions. But actually, the workflow questions, you might be able to crush these workflows and bring these kind of kits together much more dynamically if you have it. When I think about the interactive augmented reality storytelling, where having an understanding of the physical context in real time of a world that the storyteller has never seen and hasn't considered because it's the consumer's world and it needs to adapt to those circumstances. There are all these pieces that feel impossible or economically improbable without some additional new technology that lets us synthesize these things. So we'll cover both sides of it. At the highest level, how do you see, generative AI as a contributor or a danger to this art and entertainment? You talked a little bit about how it could be a contributor. Some of these things are just too expensive today, so we don't do them. So if it makes them less expensive, maybe that now becomes a story we can tell, was before we couldn't tell the story. That's one piece. Is there more that we're missing here?
Well, I think one thing, both AI and generative AI as terms, are overused in many ways.
They're inspecific at the very least. Yeah,
that's right. We've been using AI for over a decade, like machine learning in various areas, both to optimize or improve processes, facial performance tracking to make sure that an actor's performance is fully preserved when put on a character.
Yep.
All the way through denoising, which is basically generative AI. You have an input image and an output image of a different style. It has less noise.
That's right.
And so little by little, some of these workflows, they just progressively are adopted when they're the right tool for the job.
Yeah.
And like you were saying, leading with technology a lot of times either is wasteful or doesn't make sense, or it doesn't help the creative.
Yeah,
like
right.
What exactly are we trying to solve? And so it's really, again, going back to that best tool for the job. As things evolve, we want to maximize the number of tools that we have at our disposal and that the artists can use to do their job as well as possible, to tell the best possible story. Now, I think where there's risk, I don't see that risk for us, but I do see that risk in general, is that there's an interesting aspect that isn't very well studied, which is how much the way in which you come up with the result affects the quality of the result.
Yeah.
What kind of like friction was involved in figuring out the storytelling, the look, what you wanted out of it. And if in some you see these like hitting a button type solutions of like text to video,
the friction goes away.
What the likelihood of having the content being as good as it could be is lower.
Yeah.
I think there's also a higher chance of constraints inspire, where when you have a box, we were talking earlier about like if the shark had worked better in Jaws, would it be a worse movie?
Yeah,
and there's a little bit of that where it forces you creatively to not be completely unbounded, for better or worse, but often leads to much better outcomes. And I think that's where there's a little risk, where suddenly you lose sight of what matters most. Is the storytelling good? Is the composition, the beats, etc.? And the fear is being flooded with content is bad on something like YouTube or elsewhere. On our end, we don't have that risk because our brand, our goal is executing a creative vision at the highest level possible on time and on budget.
Yeah, that's right.
But so slop is like the furthest it could be from what we produce.
That's right. Yeah.
But I think there is that risk of sometimes if certain things are too easy, you lose a little bit on that kind of push and pull that you get when working something out.
Yeah. There's one of the observations that I've had about if you look at the history of technology, humans constantly rediscover what it is to be human, what is uniquely ours. And then we kind of think we have it, and then we have like some new technology, and it challenges that notion. And we don't find that we've lost our humanity. We find that there's like actually an even more fundamental piece. There's a degree of faith you have to have in audiences here. I'm sure there are stories that can be generated at the push of a button that like audiences find entertaining or interesting or whatever the thing is. In my head, it echoes with the story I told about Ansel Adams and photography, where it's like, and then you have the stories we will tell will have to be even more outlandish to break through, and we will discover through that process like an even more fundamental construct. But it is like the faith has to be in audiences. Like you have to trust an audience is going to like want the thing, and that we as creatives, we as tool makers, but the larger audience of creative storytellers will find those resonant areas that are, for whatever reason, dark. Like they're not lit up. Maybe not by the AI, maybe not even in the history of human storytelling. Like they're just like, they're latent, they're available, and they're interesting, and they're compelling. My biggest counterpoint to a lot of these, like the push a button pieces, is if you think about how tremendously big the audience is, for example, around a Star Wars, or not to be entirely a home team like Harry Potter or Tolkien, like the tremendous audience is built over time, and people cannot get enough of these stories. Like the depth of desire they have to immerse themselves in these universes is very. These are big universes, and they have nuance, and they have rules.
And they have a really high bar for them.
Very high bar, and they have a compelling point of view that for some reason is widely resonant. Right? Like we've told thousands and thousands and thousands of stories, and sometimes some of them just rise above the others in terms of the resonance that they have, the longevity that they have, and the concomitant conviction and audience they build. And that feels deeply human. That's something that we talk about a lot in our social network business, is like, these are communities that have formed around content. Content is this like interesting piece of a piece of an artifact that exists in our world around which humans align themselves. And we think of it sometimes, it's more naked when it's like a football team, and it's like, yeah, we're all out literally in uniform, like rooting for it. But like, no football team has the fan base that Star Wars has. Like, like none of them do. So I think it's a very interesting. That's another part of this question for me, is also, okay, in a world where the top of the content funnel is ever bigger because every person can tell whatever story, it's more competitive, it's harder. But I feel like I don't know how much it changes the bottom of the funnel, the resonant ones that break through,
right,
and the connection that we feel around those.
Right. Yeah, I entirely agree with that. And I think it's interesting, the three that you mentioned, like there's Harry Potter, or Lord of the Rings, or Star Wars. Those are huge, big budget. But then there's also the bottom of the funnel for just highly creative, really good content. Like, we work on Star Wars, but we also work on Sinners and and movies like that, where you make some of these stories possible that, again, wouldn't have been possible before.
Yeah.
And that people crave because they're unique. They tap into something that is not just the drudgery that they see all the time. I think that's the competitive advantage for both studios and people executing the work, is focusing on those things that stand out in a way. What's really interesting to me too in storytelling is, like, there's 5 classic stories that you tell in different ways, but I think that's also where you deeply connect to human emotion and to that aspect of feeling good about like being a hero doing right, or things like that you're also putting something into the world that I think helps you navigate the world. Where we're not curing cancer, but there's an aspect of positivity and, like, what kind of human do you want to be, that stories and film and interactive that helps be a mirror for that and helps drive you, I think, in positive directions. I feel really good about there being aligned incentives for, like you're saying, how do you differentiate yourself if the funnel is that big? You differentiate yourself by creating things that are really great. And that means that from a business point of view, there's an incentive to do something better and different, which is exciting. Yeah, this is an interesting part. It's not just one funnel. Maybe there's one funnel for the Lord of the Ringses and the Star Warses of the world. But actually, what's cool about the modern landscape is there's like infinity funnels. Like you can, in a way that really wasn't possible 20 years ago, you can tell a story, and if it's even resonant with a small audience, it has a chance of finding that audience, which was not previously the case. Super fascinating. I'm really eager to see how it plays out. I'm really excited about the potential to increase the amount of stories that can be told. I think I'm very fascinated to see what we do with that. But I share everyone else's anxiety about how do we on the audience side manage this tremendous top of funnel influx of content in a way that we still get connected with the stuff that we care the most about. In the end, the things that are resonant with us in the end. Right. We've gone through so many of these things here. Let me see how we're doing. Storytelling, yes, we've done that. State of the art of AI and creativity and visual effects, we've done that. This is one. Okay, I'm pretty excited. This is more of a quick fire question, but it's a fun one. I love whenever I talk to somebody who has really reached a super high level in their craft. I kind of like to know what they see as the pinnacle. What are the things that impress you? So when you look at visual effects in film, and you go back and you think of all of, whether you've been involved in them, and you're welcomed either way to tell your own work. When you think about all the visual effects you've seen in film, what stands out to you in your memory as like, that was an unbelievable achievement in film? Yeah, I think there's a difference between what was the hardest to accomplish, or what was the best visual effects, versus what resonated, what you might have an emotional connection with. I would go with the one where you as an audience member, not you as a technician necessarily, you as an audience member were like, wow, that was like spectacularly well done. So it's a combination of like the achievement and the resonance of that achievement for what it did for the thing. Yeah, it's hard to pick your favorite, I'm sure.
And it occurs to me now I'm probably asking you to pick between work that your colleagues all did. Or just
No.
tougher.
Well, and it's also, so growing up, I was really into horror films. And so a lot of what I initially wanted to do was like makeup effects, transformation, miniatures that you blow up. Going from the Roger Cormans of the world to all the way through. And so early on, one of the things that impressed me the most were the special effects in John Carpenter's The Thing. So this is Rob Bottin, Stan Winston also worked on that, but it also had a mix of different things, including, so one of the scenes is one of the characters collapsed. They're trying to bring him back to life with like paddles. And as they're doing the shocks, the entire chest opens up, bites off the person's hands, chaos ensues, the head falls off, legs grow, and it walks off like a spider. And so all of that is a mix of like stop motion and miniature and animatronic and all these things. And that to me was one of the things of like, I want to do all of that.
That's awesome.
I'll mention a couple others that, because one, we mentioned like special effects and visual effects are all about cheating. We're like, we're just filming it from this camera angle, or we're just seeing these things. How do you get that done most efficiently and the highest level of quality possible? And this is kind of niche, but the Escape from New York.
Okay.
Where it's like Snake Plissken has to fly into New York, which is this like prison, also a John Carpenter movie, actually. And we could do computer-generated imagery at the time, like the kind of wireframe art that was even in Star Wars, but they couldn't really afford it. It would have taken too long. So they basically did these black boxes with white retroreflective tape around the edges, lit it up and graded it green, and it just looked like a wireframe of a 3D model that's playing back on the ship's point of view. And you would never guess that it was not done on a computer, but it was done practically to look like.
That's really funny. They just literally put black boxes with the reflective tape, shot it that way.
And it looks like a wireframe.
That's really funny.
But yeah, that evolution.
An era when physically boxing up a wireframe was cheaper than doing
right. So that we probably wouldn't do today.
No, that's pretty amazing.
But no, I think all those evolutions. I mean, sorry, I'm going to ramble. The one where I was most impressed, I think I was going to say slightly more modern era, but not quite digital, is in Return of the Jedi. There's at the very end, the space battle, when the Millennium Falcon arrives. There's a point of view from the cockpit of the Millennium Falcon with all the TIE fighters like flying away. And then you see a wide shot of the entire battle. And optical compositing just made that possible at a scale where like it catches your breath. Like, you're like, oh my God, how did they do that?
Yeah, incredible. Yeah, absolutely. I know exactly the shot.
And then, obviously down the road, then there's the tipping point into more CG.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of people mention Jurassic Park as a key milestone. For me, it was Terminator 2.
Yeah.
Where really that embedding of like CG for the right reasons and at a level of quality where you're really leaning into what's possible with the technology, not like overusing it.
And I can't believe how well it holds up. I watched it again recently. And it's pretty staggering how good T2 was.
That's right.
Or the T1000. How good he was.
Yeah, liquid metal.
Liquid metal to this day. Like I'm like staggering. By the way, great villain too. What a terrifying concept of a villain. Just like magically
runs after you without stopping.
Reconstitutes itself no matter what happens.
There's some AI allegories in there.
Yeah, that's right. No, it's a concern. We'll keep an eye on that one.
The other character really holds up is Davy Jones. Like Pirates of the Caribbean.
Yeah.
That was the one time where of course it's CG. There's no other way they could have done it. But you don't even think about it.
Yeah,
it just feels like you feel that human emotion, that detail.
Yeah, and they were so clever with the interactions too. Like when he pulls the key and he's using his tentacles to pull the key. And
right.
There's a real cleverness to how much they leaned on that character having that affect in their face.
That's right.
Yeah.
This
is exactly what I like. See, this is like just for completeness. What I was doing with this is the thing that got me into artificial intelligence as a kid was playing the video game Metal Gear Solid, but MGS3, and they had their AIs in retrospect actually don't hold up. They were very dumb, but like if you left footprints in the snow, they would like follow the footprints, and it was like you actually felt like you had to be slightly clever to out. It was the first time you had to be clever to outplay an NPC. Right before that, you're just like, oh, I'm standing behind the NPC. And like I can stand here as long as I want, and they'll never find me. That was like so. Yeah, I think anyone who gets super deep into any area though has like an origin story, and then has like pieces of work that maybe the casual person doesn't respect how hard that was, or how hugely successful this effect was, and then but you have become an expert, and you can kind of see those things. Okay, well, this is wonderful. Thank you for joining me. I appreciate you having it.
I enjoyed this.
I enjoyed it too, and I really was so grateful for the partnership that we've had, bringing these wonderful universes into the immersive space. So thank you for taking that leap with us and finding these new storytelling medium.
Look forward to more.
Francois, where should people follow you if they want to learn more about the latest of what's going on with Lucasfilm, Industrial Light and Magic, or you yourself?
Obviously, definitely follow all of our kind of social media PR channels for Lucasfilm, Industrial Light and Magic, Skywalker Sound. Lots of fun stuff posted there. I'm a little less active online, but f.chardavoine for his first initial last name on Threads and Instagram. You can find me there.
Well, wonderful. And you have really a really unfair advantage in terms of the content you guys get to put out on your social media channels compared to the rest of us. So I do recommend those as follows. Everyone, this has been Boz To The Future. You can listen to it wherever you listen to fine podcasts, and I will see you in the future.